The abandoned silver mines of Braavos were not difficult to find. Arya traveled lightly. Rations of food and water accompanied her on the short journey. She laid low for a day and a night, accomplishing the appropriate amount of reconnaissance. The sentries were careful not to reveal themselves, but few could conceal themselves from Arya's watchful eye. No industrial work was being accomplished. Still, their guards operated with precision. They were well supplied as well as organized. Once she had appropriated the correct amount of intelligence, she made her move, slowly and deliberately. An infiltration through one of the access tunnels would likely spill an excessive amount of blood and noise. The silver mines started out as a network of naturally occurring seaside caves. As the water rescinded over thousands of years, numerous oligarchs made claims to the caves. Slave labor mined tons of ore, and eventually the Iron Bank was the result. Long ago, these mines were abandoned, perhaps due to exhaustion of resources or the outlawing of slave labor in the Free City. Arya scaled to the top of Seaside Mount that encased the caves and the mine shafts. It was likely the builders that designed the mine would cut a ventilation shaft in case of a cave-in. After a few hours of searching, Arya found the access she was looking for. She embraced the danger and carefully made her way down. The shaft was not entirely vertical, though one false step would likely end her life as well as Bran's. Arya focused on her brother. It was the only way to occupy her mind from the dangers below, above, and all around her. She thought of how quickly Bran could scale the walls of this shaft in his younger days before the accident. Occasionally, a fist-sized rock would break loose and make a significant amount of noise tumbling down the ventilation shaft. The downside to the shaft being angled is sunlight failed to penetrate this far down. A light appearing at the bottom would also offer her no relief, as it would likely mean a sentry was on guard. They would be well aware of her presence given the noise Arya was making during her descent. For nearly 3 hours, Arya descended, not knowing what awaited her at the bottom. It was eerily familiar to the scaling of the chimney in the Winterfell main hall during her battle with the dead. Just as she had assumed, a dim light appeared below her. The shaft ended on a gentle slope before a steep cliff. There was nowhere for her to conceal herself, so she had to move quickly. From the cliff, she could make out the cave in all directions, as well as staircases leading to mine shafts. Arya decided to scale the vertical cliff nearly 40 feet down to the unstable ancient staircases. The condensation coated the cave walls and made this the most difficult part of the descent. Still, the illumination of the cave assisted her in the climb. Once a few feet from the staircase, she leapt as her feet finally found solid ground. Rock climbing had been one of the skills she had acquired since the Great War, a skill she impressed the importance on her daughter, Princess Brianna. The cavern was massive, with dozens of torches as far as she could see. The intertwining staircase led in all directions. Still, not a single guardsman was visible. Arya made her way towards the most illuminated area, knowing it would be the path most traveled. Another shaft led to an even larger cavern that opened to the sea. Here there were fewer torches lining the walls, as the sun could easily penetrate the darkness. As Arya moved about to achieve line of sight on all angles of the cavern, she finally saw a cell constructed by the skilled blacksmiths. Still, no sentries were present, which Arya found odd. No matter if this was indeed a trap, Arya would welcome it at this point. Bran knew the future, and she would likely be warned if her steps were to betray her. Arya tiptoed up to the cell. It was neither locked or barred. Arya entered and gasped at the sight of her brother. She failed to pay attention to anything else in the room. Bran's remaining leg had been lifted, but it had been gnawed away to the bone. The flesh that remained was blackened and dead. Bran failed to wake, and Arya removed a cold washcloth from a washbin. She patted his sweaty forehead that burned with a severe fever. Bran was pale, weak, and dying. Arya's eyes welled as she prayed for Bran to wake. He shifted his head slightly but failed to even open his eyes. Arya already knew his removal from the cavern would be difficult considering Bran's condition. Now his fever would be an added complication. Bran slightly moaned, acknowledging of Arya's presence, and a slight smile cracked his face. Arya laughed through her tears as Bran finally responded using his last bits of strength. Bran mumbled words so faint that Arya turned her head to his mouth and encouraged him to continue.
Behind you.
Arya spun, seeing only a flash of red. Before a single thought could make its way through her head, she drew Catspaw and held it at the throat of the intruder.
Who are you?
Arya demanded. And the woman in red failed to defend herself and greeted Arya with nothing more than open raised palms.
Kinvara, milady, and you are the maiden. The flames predicted your arrival. May I be of any assistance to you?
You're a red priestess, aren't you? I've met your kind before. What have you done to my brother?
Arya demanded, still clutching the handle of the blade pressed to the red priestess's throat. Arya was calm. Still, after seeing the state of Bran, murder boiled in her heart.
His maiming was not by my hand, dear maiden. We are both prisoners here. Have you any ideas as how to evacuate him?
Only one idea, but it would be poisoning him slowly.
Arya revealed, and Kinvara seemed to instantly understand.
If any infections run through his blood, he must be taken to your healers immediately. One more added toxin is not likely to put him at any more risk than he is currently in.
Arya knew Kinvara spoke the truth as she slowly removed the blade from her throat.
Air's leg will need to be cauterized before he is moved. The change in his blood circulation could kill him instantly.
Kinvara advised, and Arya reluctantly agreed. Arya turned to the brazier that warmed the room and plunged Catspaw into the hot coals. Arya turned from Bran back to Kinvara and asked the only question on her mind.
Who did this to him?
Arya demanded, and Kinvara bowed her head.
Queen Daenerys' elder brother sired a son on a slave before his death. The son was raised by the warlocks of Quoth before taking power. He is learned, curious and ruthless. He now commands the fiery hand, and even murdered our own daughter to rise to power. He has studied all matters of magic, and then discards the remains.
Kinvara informed, to which Arya had only one further question for the Red Priestess.
And what is his name?
Power resides in a name, young maiden. You above all else should know this. The one calls himself Viserys, the fourth of his name.
Arya digested this as she pulled the Catspaw dagger from the hot coals. The dagger blade glowed red-hot, and Bran stirred as Arya stared at the blade. Arya noted the runes impressed upon the blade of which she had no understanding. Kinvara stepped behind Arya to note the same view as the one she called Maiden. Arya heard a slight gasp as Kinvara likely knew what was impressed upon the blade. Arya turned to the Red Priestess, her eyes likely demanding an explanation.
What is it? What do you know?
Arya demanded as Kinvara replaced the blade back into the coals.
When you return to the west, recreate what we have just witnessed here. Then muster your best linguists and interpreters.
Kinvara explained to Arya's irritation. Arya opened her mouth to retort, but Kinvara interrupted her protest before it could start.
Prophecies are dangerous, milady. Better you hear it from one of your own culture before you allow it to manipulate your actions.
Arya seemed to agree. It was a risk to allow this priestess to interpret this message. Words so important they were recorded thousands of years ago for someone in the present day. Arya again removed the reheated blade from the coals and pressed it to Bran's rotting flesh. Arya half expected Bran to squirm at the pain, temporarily forgetting Bran had not felt his legs for nearly 2 decades. The smell of burning, rotted flesh filled the cavern with a rancid odor. Arya's stomach turned. It smelled worse than Harrenhal. Arya turned to see that Kinvara had departed. Arya cooled her blade in the washbin and watched as the water boiled and hissed. Still no one seemed aware Arya was present in the caves. Arya reached deep into her satchel and unfolded a pale bit of leather. She held it up to light, and the eyeholes of the face appeared in the candlelight. Arya wiped Bran's sweaty face before applying it firmly. Bran gasped and excitedly took a deep breath into his lungs. He was quickly energetic and panicked in Arya's arms as he sat up. He ripped the blankets off his body as he realized he now had both his legs. Bran took panicked breath after panicked breath as he slightly wiggled his toes. He laughed through his tears as his eyes rose to meet Arya's. Arya smiled back at her brother that she could no longer recognize. Bran wore the face of some nameless soldier that was killed during the Great War. She knew anyone uninitiated in the ways of the faceless men would be slowly poisoned. Arya reluctantly kept that information from Bran, but encouraged him to stand, as they had to move quickly. Arya turned to retrieve and sheath Catspaw. She heard Bran stumble as he attempted to stand. Though his legs functioned, Bran seemed to have forgotten how to use them. Arya assisted him to his feet, and Bran finally found his voice.
There, the box. Viserys has acquired a dragon's egg. We must remove it from his clutch before he hatches it.
Bran begged as he braced himself against the cell walls. Arya slowly opened the box to reveal the scarlet and black-scaled dragon egg. Arya removed it, admired it for a bit before Bran broke her concentration.
We need to move quickly.
Why would he leave it with you?
His warlock seems to be under the impression he removed it from my cell weeks ago. I had to be careful when manipulating anything. Viserys seems to know when I do. I doubt he would risk the egg if he knew what I had done.
Bran explained as Arya gingerly placed the egg in her satchel before pulling Bran's arm around her shoulders. Bran struggled to walk, but could remain upright with assistance. They made their way up the winding staircases. The opening to the sea drew closer and closer. Arya started to have her doubts whether they could make it to the sea, but Bran seemed surprisingly calm regarding a possible swim to safety. With every step, Bran seemed stronger and more capable of walking on his own.
I've reached out to Ser Davos. He knows where to meet us. He has already pulled anchor and will meet us in the harbor.
You know, if you are aware of how this all ends, you might want to let me know. Some peace of mind could go a long way right now.
Arya demanded, but couldn't help but notice that Bran refused to answer. Whether this was a foretelling of doom for the pair of them, or perhaps years later, Bran remained tight-lipped. Arya suddenly felt more confident due to the fact Bran was not offering her direction. This must have meant the overall result would be positive. It was foolish optimism to be sure, but this attempted escape was foolish, so why not be optimistic about it, Arya thought. No sooner had Arya felt relief, a volley of arrows flew overhead. It was a warning, not an attempt. Archers had gathered below, and guardsmen charged up the staircases. They soon reached the cliff overlooking the sea as numerous arrows were aimed at them from all directions. They had no option but to jump as men-at-arms charged at them. Arya drew Frost and cut down the red armored guardsmen that charged at them. Just then, an arrow pierced Bran through his leg. Bran screamed as he fell over the cliff, clutching the armor of a soldier, pulling them both into the water below. Arya followed suit as she splashed into the sea a small distance away from where the two men struggled. Bran was underwater. The soldier seemed to be trying to drown him as Arya made her way towards them. The soldier screamed so loudly it shook Arya. That was the sound of a man shocked at his own pending death. He fell under the water, which was now a pool of crimson. Arya thought perhaps it was a shark attack as Bran broke the surface. His cloak clenched in the jaws of Arya's landshark. Nymeria had swam out to meet and defend the pair of them. Arrows still rained down as they swam fiercely towards the already underway avalanche. They were just out of the archer's reach as Ser Davos steered towards them. Arya grasped the cargo net as Bran and Nymeria held on for dear life. A basket fashioned to a pulley system slowly raised Bran and Nymeria out of the water, and Arya pulled herself aboard to be met by a smiling Davos.
We're already underway, milady, and making good speed. By the time they give chase, we'll have half a day lead on them, at least.
They sailed under the Titan of Bravos as they assisted Bran back to captain's quarters. Arya, while relieved Bran was aboard, she had to remove the face from his. His fever would soon return, but the face was likely slowly killing him as much as the infection. Her pessimistic side knew Bran would soon be reduced back to pain and frailty. Lord Varys did not make ship's movement. Their mission had changed somewhat, knowing the weapon now hidden in Arya's satchel. Lord Varys would have to understand their need for a quick departure. Arya ordered maximum speed on all masts and fled for Westeros as fast as the wind would take them.